The night was silent and heavy, as if the whole world was holding its breath, and the only sound left alive was the steady beating of his heart as he walked down the narrow street toward the small apartment that had never felt like home to him, but still waited for him at the end of every long shift. His name was Aaron, a man whose shoulders carried more weight than any pair of hands could lift, and whose eyes had forgotten how to shine after years of fighting battles that no one saw. The moon was high, yet somehow the ground still felt darker than the sky, and he kept telling himself that it was just another night, just another hour to survive. But as he reached the front steps of the building, a chill, unlike any before, crawled across his skin, making him pause. His key trembled inside his palm, and he frowned, trying to understand the strange tug in his chest. Then a soft knock echoed from behind the door. A knock at midnight. A knock that did not belong in a place like this, for no one visited him and no one cared enough to check on him, especially not at such an hour. He stood there frozen, listening to that gentle, uncertain sound again and again, until he felt something deeper than fear pricking the corners of his heart. He opened the door slowly, expecting danger or trouble or some shadow that had come to steal the few pieces of peace he had left. Instead, he found a young woman standing barefoot on the cold floor of the hallway, wrapped in a loose gray coat as if she had run out in a hurry. Her hair was a dark storm around her face, and her eyes shimmered with a strange mix of hope and sorrow. She looked up at him and whispered a single sentence that seemed to slice the air between them. "Sir, I need your help before I disappear forever." His breath caught and he stepped back, trying to understand what she meant, but she followed him with her gaze, steady and earnest, as if she had been searching for him for years. She looked familiar in a way that twisted inside his gut like a memory he had buried long ago. "Who are you?" he asked in a voice that barely sounded like his own. She stepped closer, and the hallway light flickered once, twice, before settling into a dull glow. "I am someone who has been waiting to speak to you for a long time," she said, and though her voice was soft, every word held the weight of storms. He studied her face again and again, until it struck him that she looked like a faded photograph he had once kept in his wallet, a photograph he had thrown away when grief had become too sharp to hold. That photograph was of his sister, a sister he had lost years ago, long before the world had hardened him into the man he had become. And yet, here, this stranger stood wearing the same fragile expression, the same quiet strength. He shook his head, telling himself it was impossible, but the air around her felt different, almost unreal, like she belonged to a place far from this one. She lifted her hands, asking silently for permission to step inside, and he moved aside without thinking. She walked into his dim room, looking around with sad eyes as if she could see every lonely night he had spent sitting in silence, every moment he had buried behind tired smiles. She turned back to him and said, "I came to tell you something you were never meant to learn too late." Aaron felt a sting behind his eyes, a wave he had held back for so long, threatening to spill. "What is it?" he asked. His voice cracked and his chest burned. She touched his arm lightly, and warmth bloomed beneath her fingers, a warmth too gentle to belong to a stranger. "You spent your whole life thinking you failed to save her," she whispered. "You carried that pain like a chain around your soul, but you were wrong. She wanted you to know that none of it was your fault. She wanted you to live free of that shadow." The room blurred around him, and his knees weakened as if the floor no longer wished to hold him. He had convinced himself he had moved on. He had lied to himself again and again, telling the world he was fine, while inside he scrapped together the broken pieces of a love he never had the chance to protect. He covered his face with his hands, and the tears he had starved for years finally broke through, spilling with a rawness that shook his whole body. She watched him with a tenderness that felt both familiar and impossible. Then she spoke again. This part will hurt, but you need to hear it. You need to know that she never blamed you, not once, not in her final moments, not in the silence after. All she ever wanted was for you to live with joy instead of guilt. He sobbed openly, the way a child cries when the world becomes too large, too loud, too heavy. His grief poured out and she stayed silent, allowing him to unravel piece by painful piece. When he finally lifted his head, she smiled, a small, gentle smile that trembled like a candle flame in the wind. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for telling me the truth." She stepped back and her shape shimmered faintly, as if light was weaving through her edges. He frowned, reaching out, but she shook her head softly. "I cannot stay," she said. "My time here is already fading." He wanted to ask who she really was, how she had found him, and how she knew everything he had hidden inside his heart, but another question pushed through the others. "Were you sent by her?" Her smile widened just a little, enough to answer without words. She walked toward the open door, the darkness of the hallway pulling at her form like a gentle tide. Before she crossed the threshold, she turned back and whispered the final sentence that made his tears return with the force he could not contain. She said, "She wanted me to tell you. She never left you, Aaron. She only walked ahead so you could follow the light." He gasped as the hallway light flickered once more, and she vanished completely, leaving only the cool sense of night air drifting into the room. He stood there trembling, holding his chest, feeling a warmth that had not lived inside him for years. And though the door stood open and the world outside remained the same, something inside him had changed forever. For the first time since his childhood, he felt the weight of his sorrow lifting, and as he closed the doors softly behind him, he sensed a faintest whisper echo through the room, a whisper that made his heart finally breathe. "You are not alone."